In episode 22 of our CySec101 series, we're going to go through the public key cryptography basics. In the last one, we talked about the basics of cryptography, and today we're going to talk about public key cryptography. And this is a part of the cryptography module of the Cybersecurity 101 pathway of TryHackMe. And we got two videos after this, which is hashing the basics and then John the Ripper basics as well. So it's going to be a good one. It's an exciting one. And for this video, we're going to go through the introduction for public key cryptography. We're going to go through the common uses of the asymmetric encryption, the RSA type of encryption, or the key files, specifically Diffie-Hellman Key Exchange, SSH, digital signatures and certificates, PGP and GPG. Say that fucking 3 times fast. And that's pretty much it. And then we do have a virtual machine that is available for this one as well. So we're going to be using our virtual machine as we go through this, and it should be pretty exciting. It should be insightful and exciting, and hopefully you will get a lot out of it. If you'd like to support this channel, consider joining Hackaholics Anonymous, the premier YouTube community for security professionals and hackers. We have 4 tiers: the supporter, agent, guardian, and master, and each tier gets their own Discord server and early access to content. But the advanced tiers, the agent, guardian, master, and levels, get exclusive content, exclusive downloads, monthly Python automations, live streams with me every month, plus so much more. And you can join by simply clicking the link in the description below, or you can go to our homepage and click the join button, or you can go to youtube.com/@hankhackshackers/join, and you'll be able to join Hackaholics Anonymous. Now, without further ado, let us jump into public key cryptography basics. The best way to introduce public key cryptography, and say that 3 times fast, we can go through a real life scenario. So everyday life. Let's say you are meeting a business partner over coffee and discussing somewhat confidential business plans. Let's break down the meeting from security perspective, okay? You can see and hear the other person. Consequently, it's easy to be sure of their identity because you can see them. And that's also considered authentication. You are confirming the identity of who you're actually talking to. You can also confirm what you are hearing is coming from your business partner because you can tell what words and sentences are coming from their mouth and what is coming from other people's mouths. That is also called authenticity. You can verify that the message genuinely comes from a specific sender, which is the person sitting in front of you. Moreover, you know what they are saying, it's actually reaching you because you can hear it, right? There's no chance of anything changing the other person's words across the table. That is known as integrity, meaning what you're hearing is actually what you think you're hearing, ensuring that the data has not been altered or tampered with, unless the person was like under hypnosis or something and somebody was telling them what to tell you, which is very possible. I guess hypnosis is probably possible. Or, you know, there was this movie that recently came out called Carry On, that was on Netflix, that the guy had an earpiece in his ear and the person who was holding him, blackmailing him, basically was telling him what to say and what to do and things like that. So unless it's a situation like that, you can probably rest assured that the person that you're talking to is saying what they're saying, and it's holding integrity. I guess another example would be what happened with the deepfake social engineering hack that happened against the bank several months ago, maybe like the beginning part of 2024. Where the bank got robbed for $100 million because one of the bankers thought that he was talking to his CEO when in actuality was talking to a deepfake video of the CEO. So there's a lot of different ways that you can get around this, but we're assuming that the person is sitting in front of you, they have not been hypnotized, they're not being held at blackmail, and you can guarantee that you're hearing what you're hearing. That's basically what we're assuming here. Finally, you can pick a seat away from the other customers and keep your voice low so that only your business partner can hear you. That's called confidentiality, and only the authorized parties can access the data. So that's kind of like a real life example of this. So if we compare this with correspondence in the cyber realm, when someone sends you a text message, how can you be sure who they are and they're actually who they claim to be? How can you be sure that nothing has changed the text as it traveled across the various network links and got to you? When you're communicating with your business partner over an online messaging platform, you need to be sure of the following. Authentication. You want to be sure that who you're communicating with is the actual right person and not someone else that's pretending, which is what happens in a lot of phishing scams. You need to be sure that the information that you're getting is coming from the right sources. It's coming from the actual person that you think you're speaking with. And you need to be sure that no one changes the data that you exchange, and you want to prevent any unauthorized party from eavesdropping on your conversation and stealing that data. So cryptography can provide solutions to satisfy all of these requirements, among many other requirements. Private key cryptography, also known as symmetric encryption, is mainly protecting the confidentiality portion. However, public key cryptography, which is also known as asymmetric cryptography, plays a significant role in authentication, authenticity, and integrity. So we're going to be talking about various examples of how this actually works. So this would be room 2 in our cryptography series. The last video that I did, the last episode, was on the basics of cryptography, and the next one is going to be on the basics of hashing. And in this room, we're going to talk about the RSA, which is I think of it as the real secure algorithm, but it stands for something else. And it's a method for encrypting data using 2 keys, one to lock and one to unlock. So one to encrypt and one to decrypt. And it relies on the difficulty of factoring large numbers. We have Diffie-Hellman, which is the next one, SSH, secure shell. And then we have SSL and TLS certificates. And then we have PGP and GPG. That's so freaking confusing. GPG stands for the GNU Privacy Guard. We'll be talking about it in a little bit. It's free and open source encryption software that uses public key cryptography. GPG can be used to encrypt files and messages and to sign files and messages, encryptions, so on and so forth. This is actually a very timely place for us to review cryptography and going into all of these things, because quantum computing is coming up, and it's one of those tools that it's going to be the evolution of cryptography, because it can so easily decrypt very complex algorithms because of its computing power. Exchanging keys for symmetric encryption is a widespread use of asymmetric cryptography. So to be able to send a key, a private key or a password to somebody, is one of the most common uses for asymmetric cryptography, which essentially encrypts the communication modem, or the communication mode that the medium that you're using to communicate with the other party, so that you can send them the private key. So asymmetric encryption is relatively slow compared to symmetric encryption. Therefore, we rely on asymmetric encryption to negotiate and agree on symmetric encryption ciphers and keys. But the solution is, how do you agree on a key with the server without transmitting the key for people who are snooping, and so they would be able to see it, right? So imagine you have a secret code for communicating and instructions for using the secret code. The question is how you can see the instructions or send these instructions to your friend without anyone else being able to read them. The answer is more straightforward than it seems. You could ask your friend for a lock. Only your friend has the key for this lock, and will assume you have an indestructible box you can lock it in. If you send the instructions in a locked box to your friend, they can unlock it once it reaches them and read the instructions. After that, you can communicate using this secret code without the risk of people snooping. In this metaphor, the secret code represents a symmetric encryption cipher and key, and the lock represents the server's public key, and the key represents the server's private key. So, secret code is the symmetric encryption cipher and key. The lock is the public key, and the lock's key is the private key, right? So consequently, you would only need to use asymmetric cryptography once, so that it doesn't affect the speed, and then you can communicate privately using symmetric encryption. So once you've established that connection using the asymmetric cryptography, because it is slower, so you've established a connection, the symmetric key, the secret code, has actually been passed. Once that's been done, you can then communicate privately using that symmetric encryption, because it's faster to communicate with a person. So in the real world, in reality, you need more cryptography to verify that the person you're talking to is who they actually say they are. This is achieved using digital signatures and certificates, which we will visit later in this video. So in the analogy presented, what real object is analogous to the public key? And that was the lock. There we go. Perfect. All right, cool. Let us talk about RSA. RSA is a public key encryption algorithm that enables secure data transmission over insecure channels. With an insecure channel, we expect adversaries to eavesdrop on it. So the math that makes RSA secure, which is going to be obsolete because of quantum computing. So they will come up with new and more sophisticated algorithms to actually make this happen. But for the time being, the math that makes RSA secure is based on the difficult problem of factoring a large number. Multiplying two large prime numbers is a straightforward operation. However, finding the factors of a huge number takes much more computing power. It's simple to multiply two prime numbers together, even on paper. So let's say 113 times 127, it equals to 14,351. Even for larger prime numbers, it would be a feasible job, even by hand. Consider the following numeric example. Prime number 1 is this, prime number 2 is this. So when you multiply that, you get this massive number right here. On the other hand, it's pretty tricky to determine what two prime numbers multiply together to make 14,351, and even more challenging to find the factors of this massive result right here. So in a real world example, the prime numbers would be much bigger than the ones that we see right here. So a computer can easily factorize this. However, it cannot factorize a number with more than 600 digits. Quantum computer can, current level of computer cannot. And you would agree that the multiplication of the two huge prime numbers, each around 300 digits, would be easier than the factorization of their product, right? So if you multiply two 300 digits, that process, that formula would relatively be easier than trying to figure out the factor of a 600-digit number, meaning what were the two numbers that were multiplied that ended up with this 600-digit number. It could be a variety of different numbers, right? So for example, if you wanted to get 10, it could be 1 times 10, or it could be 2 times 5. That's a very, very basic example, but you can see that just for the number 10, you have at least two different sets of factors that could potentially exist. So we're going to revisit encryption, decryption, and the key usage in asymmetric encryption. And the public key is known to all correspondents and used for encryption, while the private key is protected and used for decryption. And this is the visual that we had from our last exercise, our last video that we did. So we had the plain text, which is coming from Alice, and Bob's key, and that was used to encrypt the data and turn it into ciphertext. And then the ciphertext using Bob's private key. So this is Bob's public key. Using Bob's private key, it was used to decrypt the ciphertext and turn it to plain text so that Bob could read it. So Alice and Bob are our two common examples that are used in cryptography, and a lot of different examples because A and B, Alice and Bob, very easy, right? So that is what we have for that example. Now, in the basics room, we explained the modulo operation, not confused with modello, and said it plays a significant role in cryptography. In a simplified numerical example, we see the algorithm in action. So both two choose prime numbers. Bob chooses two prime numbers, Bob chooses two prime numbers, P equals 157 and Q equals 199. He calculates that N equals P times Q, which ends up being 31,243. With this formula right here, Bob selects E equals 163, such as E is relatively prime to this particular example. I don't even know what this stands for right here, so I'm not even going to try to guess it. Moreover, he selects D equals 379, where E times D equals 1, and the mod, which is modulo, ends up being this. I'm not going to try to read this right now because this is, again, I don't know what some of these symbols even represent. So this seems like advanced arithmetic beyond my skill set. So, you know, I'm not the smartest guy, as you probably have figured out already. The public key is N, comma, E, and an example would be 31,243, comma, 163. And the private key is the $ND, which would be 31,243, 379. So which would be this version right here, 379. So the 31,243 ends up being in both of them, which is the lock, so to speak. And then the public key is the 163, and then the private key is the 379, right? So we know that 379 multiplied by 163 will end up giving us this specific value, I would assume. I think that's what it is. I'm not even sure. I feel like I need to use a calculator to even figure out if that's actually true or not. So let's see if that is indeed the case. Can I drag my calculator? I can. So let me just I'm going to do the calculation real quick just to see if that's even the case, right? So if we have 379 times, or 379 times 163 is 61,777. I see. So this is where this piece comes right here. So this is the piece right here. 6177 mod 30888 equals 1. And the public key is now this, and the private key is now this. And so this is the part where I kind of skipped because I didn't know what the heck I was talking about. So he selects D as being 379. So we have P and Q available for us. And this is what calculates 31,243. And with this particular example, we get that 31,243 minus 157, which ends up being this, and then minus 199, which ends up being this, plus 1 equals 30,888. Then Bob selects E, being 163, such as E is relatively prime to mod 30,888 equals 1, and the public key ends up being 31,243, 163, and the private key ends up being 31,243, 379. It is complicated. I fully understand that it's complicated. We don't need to understand this. We're just going through an example of what the modulo operation can do to create the RSA algorithm and how that actually works. You do not need to understand this because I don't understand this, right? So just this symbol right here, I'm like, what? I've never even seen that before. So if you're a math genius and if you've taken advanced mathematics, please let me know because your boy here is limited. So let's say that the value they want to encrypt is x equals 13. Then Alice would calculate and send y equals x to the power of e mod n equals 13 to the power of 163 mod 31,243 equals 16,341. If that makes sense to you, please explain it to me. Bob will decrypt and receive the value by calculating x equals y to the power of d mod n equals 16,341 to the power of 379 mod 31,243 equals 13. This way, Bob recovers the value that Alice sent. Okay, I guess that's how they did it, right? That's how modulo works. So the proof that the above algorithm works can be found in modular arithmetic and is beyond the scope of this module. No shit. It is worth repeating that in this example, we picked a 3-digit prime number, while in an actual application, P and Q would be at least 300-digit prime numbers each. So imagine what these freaking things are going to look like. Instead of 3-digit numbers, they're going to be 300-digit numbers. Ah, my God, I'm exhausted already. Okay, here we go. RSA in capture the flag situations. The math behind RSA comes up relatively often in capture the flags, requiring you to calculate variables or break some encryption based on them. Many good articles online explain RSA, and they will give you almost all of the information you need to complete the challenges. One good example of RSA CTF challenge is the breaking RSA room. So let's see if we've even done this. Probably have not done this. I have not done this, so that's an interesting example of it. And we can already see that we have all these. This is a nice little script that is a Python function. Very cool. I love Python. There are some excellent tools for defeating RSA challenges in CTFs. My favorite is the RSA CTF tool, which has worked for me. I've also had some success with the RSA tool. You need to know the main variables for RSA in CTFs, which are P, Q, M, N, E, D, and C. As per our numerical example, P and Q are large prime numbers. N is the product of P and Q. The public key is N and E. The private key is N and D. M is used to represent the original message. C represents the encrypted text. I'm guessing we're going to be using this at some point in this room. Otherwise, I don't understand why they would even share this information with us. So crypto CTF challenges often present you with a set of these values, and you need to break the encryption and decrypt a message to retrieve the flag. So knowing that P equals 4391 and Q equals 6659, what is N? So N is the product of P and Q, which means that we're essentially going to be doing what, right? So we did P equals 157, Q equals 189, N equals P times Q, so the product, right? So we are basically multiplying that. So I do have my calculator handy now. So let's do this. 4391 multiplied by 6659 equals 2, check this out. Ready for this? 292396669, that is the number. Knowing that P equals 4391 and Q equals 6659, what is this of N? And this is where I am now drawing a blank. So what does that even represent here? So okay, so this is what confused me with trying to understand this. Okay, now I actually get it. This is not that complicated. This whole thing is a little bit confusing because of the way that they wrote this, right? So if we were to look at this just being the formula to find out what this value is, what that means is that N, which is the product of these two, so it's 31,243. So N ends up being, or the value of this ends up being N, which is this, minus P, which is this, minus Q, which is this, plus 1. So what that means numerically is that 31,243, which is this, minus 157, which is P, minus 199, which is Q, plus 1. That's how you get this. Because they wrote all of it in one freaking line, I'm like, what is this? So that's why it didn't actually click for me. But the calculation is pretty simple. First, you multiply these two, you get N. And then you subtract it from these things, and then you add 1. So to be able to calculate this, we did this, right? So we multiplied these two, which ended up giving us this. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and subtract this number on my calculator. I'm going to subtract 4391 from it, and then I'm going to subtract 6659 from it, and I'm going to add 1 to it, and that's going to end up being, hopefully, the right number. So we have 292, 620, and that's the right number. Okay, so there you go. That's what we get, right? So the way that we calculate N is first we multiply this. The way we calculate this, so I don't know, I guess prime of N, I think that's what that is, probably, right? Getting prime of N. I think that's what that calculation does for us. With this, Bobby Hicks, relatively prime to, I think so. I think that's what that sign is supposed to be. Let me see if I can find out. Okay, so basically, based on what I understand, I think, okay, so this is called Euler's product formula, and Euler's totient function counts the positive integers up to a given integer, which is n, that are relatively prime to n. It is written using the Greek letter phi as or, and may also be called Euler's phi function. So that is the phi of n, right? So if you do anything like this, when you put this in parentheses, you're essentially multiplying phi by n, so that it is the phi of n. That's basically what we're looking at over here. So if we go over here, then what we're calculating is phi of n. I literally just learned this for the very first time today. So this is actually, we're literally advancing our knowledge together. So to be able to calculate phi of n, it just feels so good to be able to say that now. What happens is that first we have to calculate the product of this, meaning you multiply this by this, and it gives us n. And then to be able to calculate phi of n, we take this final value, which is actually n, we subtract it we subtract this number by this, and then we subtract this as well, and then we add 1 at the very end of it, and then we actually get the phi of n, which ends up being this number. So now it actually makes a little bit more sense to me, and I got there. So I counted myself out really early in the game, and I love when people like immediately start commenting when I make a mistake, and they're like, actually, this is the thing. And it's like, okay, well, if you actually make it to the end of that section, whatever the video is on, if you make it to the end of that section, I usually try to figure it out because it bothers me when I don't figure things out. And so I wonder if the comment warriors that we actually got leaving me all these comments will end up watching it to the end and be like, oh, wow, he figured it out. So if you did stick it out all the way here, now we both learned together. And if you already knew this and you stuck it out with me, now you should be proud of me because I stuck to it as well and I figured it out. So now we can move on to Diffie-Hellman Key Exchange. As we've already established, one of the challenges of using symmetric encryption is sharing that secret key. So let's say you want to send a password protected document to your business partner to discuss confidential business strategies, how would you share the password with them? It would be best if you had a secure channel to send that password, knowing that adversaries cannot read or alter it. And this is where the Diffie-Hellman comes in. So Key Exchange aims to establish a shared secret between two parties. It's a method that allows two parties to establish a shared secret over an insecure communication channel without requiring a pre-existing shared secret and without an observer being able to get the key. This shared secret can be used for symmetric encryption in subsequent communications. So, considering the scenario, Alice and Bob want to talk securely. They want to establish a shared key for symmetric cryptography, but don't want to use asymmetric cryptography for the key exchange. This is where Diffie-Hellman comes in. So, Alice and Bob generate secret keys independently. They will call these A and B for Alice and Bob. They also have some public common material. We'll call this C for common. We need to make some assumptions. Firstly, whenever we combine secrets, they're practically impossible to separate. Secondly, the order in which they're combined doesn't matter because A times B is equal to B times A. So Alice and Bob will combine their secrets with the common material to form AC and then BC. They will then send these to each other to combine the received part with their secret to create two identical keys, both equaling ABC. Now they can use the key to communicate. So if you found it too abstract, let's investigate. Alice and Bob agree on public variables, a large prime number P and a generator, which is G, where 0 is greater than 0 is less than G and G is less than P. Okay? These values will be disclosed publicly over the communication channel, although insecurely small. We will use P equals 29, G equals 3 to simplify the calculation. So 0 would be less than G, which is 3, and then G would be less than P, which is 29. So each party chooses a private integer. As a numerical example, Alice chose A equals 13, and then Bob chose B equals 15. Each of these values represent a private key and must not be disclosed. It is time for each party to calculate their public key using their private key from step 2 and the agreed upon public variables from step 1. So Alice calculates A equals G to the power of A mod P equals 3 to the power of 13 mod 29 equals 19. Okay, so let's try to see if we can try to figure this out. Okay, so A, which is the key for Alice, equals G to the power of A. So G would be 3 to the power of A, which is 13, right? So it would be P equals 3 to the power of 13, okay? So 29 equals 19 would essentially be the abstraction here, right? So if we have P to 3 to the power of 13 mod what is that, 29 equals 19. Bob calculates B and then he does the same thing. These are the public keys. This last piece is a little bit confusing for me, so I'm going to keep reading before I count myself out to see if I can figure it out. Alice and Bob send the keys to each other. Bob receives A equals G to the power of A mod P equals 19, which is Alice's public key, and then Alice receives Bob's public key. This step is called the key exchange. Alice and Bob can finally calculate the shared secret using the received public key and their own private key. Alice calculates B to the power of A, which is P equaling 26 to the power of 13 mod 29 equals 10, and then Bob calculates this equals 10. Both calculations yield the same result as G to the power of AB mod P equals 10, the shared secret. So let's see if we can get this from the visual here. So they agree on P and G, for example, 29 and 3, okay? Alice privately chooses A, which is 13. Bob chooses B, which is 15. Then A equals G to the power of A, which ends up being 19, and then sends it. And then Bob chooses this, which ends up being 26, and then sends it. And the key would be use this calculation to go ahead and break it down, and it's essentially using their private keys along with whatever the common data was to end up with the same number at the end, which is their public keys, which ends up helping them figure out their private keys. So the chosen numbers are too small to provide any security, and in real life applications we would consider much bigger numbers. Diffie-Hellman is often used alongside RSA public key cryptography. Diffie-Hellman is used for key agreement, while RSA is used for digital signatures, key transport, authentication, among many others. For instance, RSA helps prove the identity of a person you're talking to via digital signing, as you can confirm based on their public key. This would prevent someone from attacking the connection with a man-in-the-middle attack against Alice by pretending to be Bob. In brief, Diffie-Hellman and RSA are incorporated into many security protocols and standards to provide a comprehensive security solution. Okay, so consider P equals 29, G equals 5, and A equals 12. What is A? So let's see if I can try to figure this out. Okay, so here's what I did. I needed to, first of all, remind myself of what that mod thing stood for, which is the modular or the modulo or something like that, which is calculating the remainder of the number, trying to figure out the remainder of the number, which is what we learned in the last video. So that's something that completely slipped my mind and I couldn't wrap my head around it. So that was the reason why these calculations that we have over here weren't making sense to me, because I couldn't figure out what this piece right here meant. And so now I do. Now I understand that the mod part is representing us trying to find the remainder of the numbers, which means what? So if P equals 29, G equals 5, and A equals 12, what is A? This would be the calculation that we would have to go through, right? So P equals 29. So this is what we have, right? So if P equals 29, where is it? We have it right here. So this is the calculation. So calculating for A means that G to the power of A mod P, which means what? 3, which in this case would be G, which is what we have right here. So 3 to the power of A, which is 13, which is what Alice selected, right? Alice's A was 13. So G to the power of A would be 3 to the power of 13, okay? And then you divide that by P and get whatever the remainder is, which means what? 3 to the power of 13 divided by 29. So that's what P was. Where do we have P? P's right here. P's 29. So 3 to the power of 13 divided by 29, and then the remainder of that would be 19. Okay, that's how that calculation works, right? So Bob would do the same thing. So G to the power of B mod P would be 3 to the power of 15, because he chose 15, and then 3 would be G. So 3 to the power of 15 mod 29, which is P, would end up giving him a remainder of 26. That's what the calculation is. So this is how we just calculate this right here. So it would be G to the power of A, right? So it's G to the power of 12. So, excuse me, 5 to the power of 12 divided by 29 to give us a remainder, and then that's what the remainder would be. So this is what Gemini also helped me understand as well. I just forgot that mod part. So this is what the first part is. So 5 to the power of 12 is the G to the power of A. So let me break this down right here. So 512 mod 29A essentially is 5 to the power of 12 divided by 29, and then that gives us the mod, the remainder, okay? So this is what we have. 5 to the power of 12 means 5 multiplied by itself 12 times. That's basically what that is. The modulo operation is like a clock, is what it says. So it means that find the remainder when x is divided by y. So for example, if we have 17 mod 5 equals 2, it's because 17 divided by 5 equals 3 with the remainder of 2. So 5 to the power of 12 mod 29 means we calculate 5 to the power of 12, then divide the result by 29 and find the remainder. Okay, that's essentially what we get. So now what we can actually do is do this multiplication. I think it's actually even going to give us an example as well. But so let's actually just do it. So we're going to do 5 to the power of 12. So 5 multiplied by itself 12 times. And then we would divide that by 29. And then whatever the remainder is would be our answer. Okay, so ready for this? Let's do this. Okay, so we're going to use 2 different calculators. One of them is just going to be the basic Google calculator, and then I'm going to use a remainder calculator to try to figure this out, and hopefully we'll actually get this answer. So the first one is we need to get 5 to the power of 12. So we'll do 5, and we're going to press this button right here, which is x to the power of y, and I'm going to do 12, and then this is going to be the number that I get. So I'm going to copy this number, I'm going to take it to my remainder calculator, I'm going to paste it in here, and okay, so there we go. And now the divisor is going to be 29. What just happened? Why is that doing that? So there we go. And then the result would be 7. Perfect. Okay, so there we go. We actually got a number right here. So it's 244 million, yada, 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 divided by 29 equals to 8 million something, remainder 7. And that sounds pretty solid. So let's actually go here and see if that's the answer. Hey, that is indeed the answer. Okay, so perfect. So now, okay, now that we know this, we can actually do this other one. So 5 to the power of 17, and then divided by 29 to get the remainder. So we'll go over here, and we'll do 5 to the power of 17. It's going to give us this number, massive number. Copy that, and then go to the remainder calculator, and then paste it in here. And same thing, same divisor, and the remainder is going to be 9. So let's go over here and let's see if that's right. That is indeed right. Okay, so knowing that P equals 29, A equals 12, and you have B from the second question, which is now 9, what is the key calculated by Bob, which is B to the power of A and then mod P. So P is still 29, and then B to the power of A. So B would be 9, right? 9 to the power of A, which ends up being, what is it? A equals 12. So 9 to the power of 12, right? If B is 9 and then A is 12, the calculation would be B to the power of A mod P. So 9 to the power of 12 and then divided by 29. So let's see if we can actually find that. We'll go here and then we'll do 9 to the power of 12. That'll give us 9, 12. Is that right? 9 to the power of 12 is, no, that can't be right. 9 to the power of 12. There you go. I was like, that can't be right. Okay, there we go. So copy that now. So now that value is going to go here, and then we're going to paste it. And the divisor is still going to be 29 because we're still dividing by, we're still doing B to the power of A mod P, which is 29. So we're still doing that. And so our answer is now going to be 24, and that should be the key. Hey, look at us figuring it out. So knowing that this is this and B is 17, and we have A from the first question, what's the key? So A to the power of B, so A to the power of 17, and A is 7. So 7 to the power of 17, and then divided by 29. So let's do that. Clear this out. 7 to the power of 17 equals that. Oh my gosh, that's really long. So I need to try to find a better way to get this number because I need the actual number here. Okay, so I literally just asked Gemini what's 7 to the power of 17, and it gave me the number. So that's a quick way of doing it. And we're going to go over here, and now we're going to paste that number here, massive number, and we have remainder of 15. That actually, so that's the issue. Actually, the answer is supposed to still be 24, but for some reason, I don't know why I didn't get that answer when I ran the calculator, right? So if A is 7 and we are going to the power of B, which is 17, right? So consider this. So A is 7 and we're going to the power of 17, and then we are, right? And then we're modding by 29, which is still the same thing. We should end up with 24 because the answer should be the exact same key. But for some reason, I am not getting 24. So let's see if we, the A to the power of, so the answers are right. So the answers here are right. So the rest of this should also work the way that we need it to so that we can end up with 24 because it's supposed to be the same exact key. So that's the piece that I am trying to figure out right now. So it's A, which is 7 right here, to the power of B, the lowercase b that we have, which is 17. So 7 to the power of 17 mod 29. So getting the remainder. So we'll ask Gemini to do the calculation for us. Okay, so it actually is 24, which means that this calculator is absolute BS. So maybe I need to do 29 one more time, and then let's see if it'll update the numbers. And it still gave me 15. So this calculator is a BS right here. It cannot process information the way that it should. I will try this one more time, and we're going to paste it, and we're going to do 29, and it's still giving me 15, which means that this thing cannot calculate. It has a certain level of computing power, and that's pretty much it. So Gemini actually did our calculation for us. So 7 to the power of 17 ends up being this massive number, and then dividing that by 29 would end up giving us this piece right here, and then the remainder technically would be 24. So I would assume that it's 29 multiplied by this, and then whatever that number is, we subtract that from this, which ends up giving us 24, right? So let's try that real quick. So we'll actually do that here. So what is it? It's what is 29 multiplied by, what do we have? 802.174.186.2248. So what is that number? That number is this thing right here, right? So that would be the final number here. So I'm going to do this. So we'll do this. We'll do copy, and we'll do what is this minus, and then we'll go ahead and take our number that we got right here, this one, and we'll do that, and then we'll do what is this minus this, and that should be 24. Oh, it's 15. See, this is what I'm saying. It's like, what? How's that even possible? So how did it end up being 24? I am literally losing my mind. Mathematics is over my head tonight. My brain is just not grasping it for whatever reason. Okay, so obviously I went down the rabbit hole, and I'm not going to try to explain all these other things that I tried to get, because it is going to take up way more time, and it is beyond the scope of this video. But we will say that, you know, obviously it has to be the same key, because they have to have the same key to be able to decipher their communication. And at the same time, Gemini actually did the proper calculation for us and actually got the mod of P, the remainder essentially for us, which is of course 24. So the calculation was done correctly by Gemini. That website that I used was absolute BS, or not absolute BS, because it did work on a smaller scale. I guess it just didn't work with the larger number that I was dealing with. And we were able to get the way that we approached it. We were able to figure out the logic, meaning that we are getting the remainder, essentially. That's what we're trying to do. When you see these numbers and then it says that you're going to get the mod of something, that means you're getting the remainder. So 3 to the power of 13 mod 29 means whatever this value is, 3 to the power of 13, whatever that is, you're going to divide it by 29, and then you're going to get the remainder, which ends up being 19, and then the remainder for this one is 26, and then you would use those values to actually figure out the keys, which would be the same thing. So b to the power of a, which in this particular case is 26, right? So b equals 26. B to the power of a would equal to, what was it? A is 13. So b to the power of a would be 26 to the power of 13 mod 29, meaning once you do that calculation, the remainder would be 10. 19 to the power of 5, so a to the power of b, 19 to the power of 15 mod 29 ends up being 10. So that's essentially, mod means you're getting the remainder. That was the big thing that I was missing when trying to read those calculations. And now I need to move on, because I have spent a lot of time off screen, because I'm going to edit all of that out. But I spent so much time trying to figure out how to actually get the remainder of something when it comes down to massive numbers like that. And it's difficult without a calculator. So if you don't know how to use the calculator, or if the calculator doesn't have an actual mod button here, so in this particular case, we could potentially use the percentage button, which is what it told me to do, or that's what Gemini told me to do. The math solver in this situation could potentially be another way that we could do this, but I mean, technically, I guess we could do it here. We could technically do it here, because we now have a math solver and we can do a math equation. So again, just going down this rabbit hole. So I'm going to try to figure this out real quick, and maybe I can do it, but I feel like I'm not going to be able to do it. So let me see if I can try to figure this out real quick. Yeah, okay, so the buttons specifically don't exist here, and I don't have the time to sit here and try to figure out how to use the calculator on Google. So we're going to move on to Secure Shell. You know, for the most part, we figured it out. We figured out how to get the logic of those answers. It's just with massive numbers, it's going to be a little bit difficult to do it if you don't have the right calculator or if you don't know how to write the equation. But for the most part, you can use a tool like Gemini to try to figure it out for you. Moving on. Okay, so SSH can be, we've used it a lot in a lot of the labs that we've done on this channel, and it's a remote login tool for, just to sum it up in one sentence. There is a certain process that goes with it. For example, when you actually log in, so SSH to this particular thing, the connection, it says the authenticity of this can't be established. The key fingerprint is this SHA hash value that we see here. The key is not known by any other person. Are you sure you want to continue? And then we say yes, and then permanently added this to the list of our known hosts. That's pretty standard when you're logging in via SSH. So the SSH client confirms whether we recognize the server's public key fingerprint, which is this thing right here. And then the public key algorithm is used for digital signature generation and verification. Our SSH client didn't recognize the key and is asking us to confirm whether we want to continue with the connection. The warning is because a man-in-the-middle attack is probable. A malicious server might have intercepted the connection and replied, pretending to be the target server. And if you don't recognize this public key algorithm, then for the most part, that means that there could be a possibility that you're talking to a malicious server. The user must authenticate the server, meaning confirm the server's identity by checking the public key signature. Once you answer yes, the SSH client will record the public key signature for this host. In the future, it will connect you silently unless this host replies with a different public key. Now that we've confirmed that we're talking with the correct server, we need to identify ourselves and get authenticated. In many cases, you have to do usernames and passwords like you would log into a physical machine. However, considering the inherent issues with passwords, this does not fall within the best security practices. At some point, one will surely hit a machine with SSH configured with key authentication instead. This authentication uses public key and private keys to prove the client is valid and authorized user on the server. By default, SSH keys are RSA keys. You can choose which algorithm to generate and add a passphrase to encrypt the SSH key. So SSH keygen is the program usually used to generate key pairs. It supports various algorithms as shown on the manual page, which you can see right here. These are the variety of algorithms that we have. So this is just for our information. We recommend that you recognize this by their names only. You don't need to go through all of this stuff and try to figure out exactly what it is. So DSA is the digital signature algorithm. There's ECDSA, there's ECDSA-SK, there's ED25519, and then 559-SK. So these are just a few algorithms that we have over here. So now we're going to generate the key pair with some default options. So SSH keygen T for the, I would say that would be the option that you can use to actually choose the algorithm itself. And then ED25519 is what we're doing over here for that key signature system. So keygen and then ED255 or whatever, and then it's going to create it. And the keys random art image is this thing. The SHA value for this is this, and then it's used for this specific user. Okay. In the above example, we didn't use a passphrase to show the content of the private key. Let's look at the generated public key, which would be in the pub file. And then I believe it shows us where the, so this is where the pub file is. This is the public key. And then the identification has been saved inside of this location. And there is no passphrase for this. So the identification has been stored here. The public key has been stored here. And then the fingerprint is there. So if we wanted to look at the public key, it would be over here, and the generator private key would be in this other location. So this is our private key. This is the public key, as you can see right here. So this is the public key, as you can see, it's right there. And then this is the private key. As we can see, it's much longer. Okay. Note that the private key is shared above for demonstration purposes and was purged afterwards. Sharing a private key would be the most insecure act anyone can commit against their security. On another note, we had used the TRSA the resulting keys would have been much longer. So if we had used TRSA instead of using the ED25, that whole thing, then the key would have been much longer. So as just mentioned, you should treat your private keys like passwords. Never share them under any circumstances. They're called private keys for a reason. Someone with your private key can log into servers and accept it, and then include authorized. It could include it among authorized keys unless the key is encrypted with a passphrase. It's very important to mention that the passphrase used to decrypt the private key doesn't identify you to the server at all. It only decrypts the private key. The passphrase is never transmitted and never leaves your system. Tools like John the Ripper, which we're going to end up doing, if you use a tool like John the Ripper, you can attack an encrypted SSH key to attempt to find the passphrase, highlighting the importance of using a complex passphrase and keeping your private key private. When generating an SSH key to log into a remote machine, you should generate the keys on your machine and then copy the public key over, as this means the private key never exists on the target machine using SSH copy ID. So, however, this doesn't matter as much for temporary keys generated to access CTF, capture the flag boxes. So, the permissions must be set up correctly to use a private SSH key, otherwise your SSH client will ignore the file with a warning. Only the owner should be able to read or write to the private key. 600 or stricter would be the permissions that you would assign to that. So SSH-I private key file name, and then the user as host is how you specify a key for the standard Linux OpenSSH client. Keys trusted by the remote host, which would be inside of our SSH folder, which is inside of the root. So .ssh is the default place to store these keys. The authorized keys, note the US English spelling. File in the directory holds public keys that are allowed to access the server if the key authentication is enabled. By default, on many Linux distributions, key authentication is enabled as it is more secure than using a password to authenticate. Only key authentication should be accepted if you want to allow SSH access for the root user. Using SSH keys to get a better shell. So during CTF's penetration testing and red teaming exercises, SSH keys are an excellent way to upgrade or reverse a shell, assuming the user has login enabled. Note that www-data usually does not allow this, but regular users and root will work. Leaving an SSH key in the authorized keys file on a machine can be useful backdoor, and you don't need to deal with any of the issues of unstabilized reverse shells like Control-C or lack of tab completion. Control-C closes out a shell. If you've logged into something, if you've logged into a secure shell session, and if it's not what is it? It's not a persistent shell or a better shell. If you don't have that, if you just do Control-C, it's going to kick you out of your secure shell session. And then tab completion is when you just press tab and it fills in the rest of the data, so on and so forth. So now we're going to check our private key in this particular machine. So check the private key in the public crypto basics task 5. What algorithm does the key use? All right, so in order to be able to do that, I'm first going to just run ls on this location that I'm at, and it says that I have public crypto basics on my file. So I'm going to do cd, and I'm going to do public crypto basics, and I'm going to go in there. And I have task 5, so cd task 5, and then we're going to list that. And then we see ID RSA, and so it says what algorithm does the key use, and it says RSA in the name, so we're going to say RSA, and that is going to be our answer. So now we can move on to digital signatures and certificates. So in the physical world, when you fill out a contract or an application or something like that, typically they ask you to sign it, right? You have your actual physical signature. In the digital world, you can't use your actual signature, stamp, or fingerprint. You need an actual digital signature. And this is where digital signatures and certificates come in. So digital signatures provide a way for you to authenticate yourself, and then the integrity of the digital message or document. Proving the authenticity of the files means that we know who created and modified them. Using the asymmetric cryptography, you produce a signature with your private key, which can be verified using your public key. Only you should have access to your private key, which proves you signed the file. In many modern countries, digital and physical signatures have the same legal value. So if you actually click a box on something in a digital form, and this has happened to me when applying for an insurance license or something like that, when you click I accept and then you type in your name and press enter, that pretty much has the same value as you physically signing something. So the simplest form of digital signature is encrypting the document with your private key. If someone wants to verify the signature, they would decrypt it with your public key and check if the files match. This process is shown in this situation. So you have Bob and Bob's private key. He takes the plain text and encrypts it, and that turns into ciphertext. And that ciphertext is sent to Alice, and using Bob's public key, she's able to decrypt it and then view the actual message. So some articles use terms like electronic signature and digital signature interchangeably. They refer to pasting an image of a signature on top of a document. This approach does not prove the document's integrity, as anyone can copy and paste an image. In this task, we use the term digital signature to refer to signing a document using a private key or a certificate. This process is similar to the image that's shown above, where Bob encrypts it, so on and so forth. Alice can decrypt the encrypted hash and compare it with the hash of the file that she received. This approach proves the document's integrity, unlike pasting a fancy image of a signature, and then we'll be talking about hashing in the next room. So certificates prove who we actually are. They're essential application of public key cryptography, and they're also linked to digital signatures. A common place where they're used is for HTTPS, which we did in the last video, just to kind of demonstrate it for you. If you go to your browser and you click into the button that's right next to the actual domain in the URL, there's something right here that says connection is secure. If I click on connection is secure, and then it says certificate is valid, and I click on that, and it actually brings up the certificate of TryHackMe. And then they have the certificate hash over here. We also have the public key hash over here as well. And this is how you can see that this is actually a valid certificate, and the certificate authority is Google Trust Services, which we know that now that's a pretty solid certificate, and TryHackMe is pretty solid, right? They have a good certificate authority. So how does your web browser know that the server you're talking to is really TryHackMe, right? The answer is in the certificate. So it has a certificate that says the real TryHackMe. The certificates have a chain of trust with the certificate authority, which is what we just saw. From install time, your device, operating system, and web browser automatically trust various root CA. Certificates are trusted only when the root CA says the trust the organization that signed them, right? So that would be Google, for example. In a way, it is a chain. For example, the certificate is signed by an organization. The organization is trusted by the CA, and the CA is trusted by your browser. Therefore, your browser trusts the certificate. In general, there are long chains of trust. You can take a look at the certificate authorities trusted by Mozilla Firefox by going to the link that has their trusted certificate authorities. For example, included CA certificates, HTML, and CSV, and yada, yada, yada. So there's a long list of certificate authorities. If we look at the HTML view of this thing, it's probably going to be a very long list of certificate authorities. As you can expect, it is a very long list of certificate authorities. So, and Google Chrome's version is on that link as well, and you can always just Google it and see what certificate authorities does Google Chrome trust, and then you'll get a giant file. So let's say you have a website and they want to use HTTPS. This step requires having a TLS certificate. You can get one from the various certificate authorities for an annual fee. Furthermore, you can get your own TLS certificate for domains using your own Let's Encrypt for free, which is a pretty powerful resource actually, and we've done this. It's a nonprofit certificate authority providing TLS certificates to 500 million websites because they are free. So a lot of different companies sponsor this website, and then you can actually get a solid free TLS certificate to actually encrypt your website. If you run a website, it's worth setting up and switching to HTTPS, as any modern websites would do. And most browsers, if you go to a website that's HTTP and it's not encrypted, it'll give you a warning and it won't even take you to the website, and it says, hey, this website is not secure. Are you sure you want to go in there? So what does a remote web server use to prove itself to the client? And that would be a certificate. What would you use to get a free TLS certificate for your website? And that would be Let's Encrypt. Very good. So let's go to PGP and GPG. PGP stands for Pretty Good Privacy, and it's a software that implements encryption for encrypting files, performing digital signing, and more. GNUPG or GPG is an open source implementation of the Open PGP standard. So they go hand in hand, right? GPG is commonly used in email to protect confidentiality in the email messages. Furthermore, it can be used to sign an email message and confirm the integrity. Below is an example of generating this. You are asked about the purpose of using GPG, whether signing or only signing and encrypting. And besides selecting the cryptographic algorithm, we need to choose the expiration date for the generated key. Finally, we provide some information about us, our name, email, so on and so forth, and a comment, usually about the purpose of the key. So GPG, full key gen or full gen key, and then this just goes through the process here. Please select what kind of key you want, and then we selected 9, and then please select the elliptic curve you want, and then we selected 1, and specify how long it should be valid, and we did 0, which is the key does not expire. And then, are you sure you want to do that? Yes. And it needs to construct a user ID to identify this. So the user ID, the email address, and then the keys were generated. So you may need to use GPG to decrypt files and CTFs. With PGP, GPG, private keys can be protected with passphrases in a similar way that we protect SSH private keys. If the key is passphrase protected, you can attempt to crack it using John the Ripper and GPG to John. The key provided in this task is not protected with a passphrase. The man page for GPG can be found online. So practical example, now that we have the GPG key pair, you can share the public key with your contacts. Whenever your contacts want to communicate securely, they encrypt their messages using your public key. To decrypt the message, you will have to use your private key. Due to the importance of GPG keys, it is vital that you keep a backup in a secure location. Let's say you got a new computer, all you need to do is import your key and you can start decrypting or receiving your messages again. You would use GPG, import backup key, to import the key from the backup. To decrypt your messages, you will need to use GPG, decrypt confidential message, GPG. So use GPG to decrypt the message in this location. What secret does it use? So we're just going to run this GPG, decrypt, and then the message itself that is included in task 7. So let's go and run that real quick. So I actually do have a TryHackMe key in here and I have the message. So first I'm just going to import the key just in case it hasn't been imported by using the import command, and then we're going to use the decrypt command to decrypt the message. So first we're just going to run GPG, and then we're going to do import, and then we're going to do tryhackme.key, and that seems to have done so magnificently. And then we're going to do GPG, and then we're going to do decrypt. Whoops, let me just spell that right. And then we're going to do message.gpg and then run that. And what do we got? Encrypted with created yada yada yada. TryHackMe example key, your decrypted file. The secret word is pineapple, and that should be our answer. So what is the secret word here? And that is pineapple, baby. Excellent. And we are now done. So let's run through the conclusion and you are free to go. Okay, so we have defined cryptography as the science of securing communication in the presence of adversaries. Another important science that studies how to break or bypass this is cryptanalysis. And for trying every possible password combination, we call it a brute force attack. When we know that the password is most likely a dictionary word, it will be more sense to try words from a dictionary instead of every possible, and that's called a dictionary attack. So cryptography is the science of securing communication using codes and ciphers. Cryptanalysis is the science of methods to break or bypass cryptographic security systems without knowing the key. And then brute force is an attack method that involves trying every possible key or password inside of or any possible password that I guess we have. And then dictionary would be a brute force attack where the attacker tries the dictionary words or combinations of them to actually break into whatever the system is that they're trying to do. We talked about asymmetric cryptography specifically in this video, and then we talked about RSA, Diffie-Hellman, SSH, key pairs, digital signatures, and certificates, and of course Open, PGP, and GPG. And that's pretty much it for this video. So a couple of final notes and you're out of here. So if you found this video useful, you can always like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so that you get notified the next time that a video comes out, especially inside of the CySec101 pathway, which is the pathway that we're on right now. And then there's a lot of other videos that also come out as well. And it's just I would say this is going to be if you're a follower of this channel and if you've watched any of the other videos, this is just the regular spiel, right? Follow, subscribe, drop a comment, ask a question. I am very responsive in the comment section. If you've ever dropped a comment, you've gotten a response from me fairly quickly, because it comes to my phone, and I more often than not I respond from my phone. So I'll respond almost right away to most of the comments that come in, and if it's a good question, I'll respond to your question with a video. And then this specific playlist, the CySec101 playlist, is a response to Darnell Knight's comment, and he gets a shout out at the end of every freaking video. So like, subscribe, turn on notification bell, drop a comment, even if you just want to say hi or if you want to say thank you. And another way to say thank you is to support this channel by joining the Hackaholics Anonymous community, which is the premier community for security professionals and hackers. There are 4 tiers: the Cyber Supporter, Agent, Guardian, and Master. Each tier gets their own Discord server and early access to content, but the Agent, Guardian, and Master levels get exclusive content, exclusive downloads, monthly Python automations, live streams with me every single month, plus so much more. And to join, you can simply click the link in the description below, or you can go to our homepage and click the join button, or you can go to youtube.com/@HankHacksHackers/join, and you'll be able to join Hackaholics Anonymous. I hope I really see you in the Discord servers. If not, I hope I see you in the comment section, and that's it. This is your boy Hank Hackers, and Hank Hacks Hackers, your favorite network and system attacker/protector. If no one else loves you, Hank loves you. Love, peace, and chicken grease, and I'll see you in the next video. Later.